The Kremlin says Ukraine's government reshuffle is of no particular importance to Russia. This is from Moscow, which has spent more than a decade trying to reshuffle Ukraine by force.
Some changes are taking place within the structure of the Kiev regime. For us, all these changes are of no fundamental importance. What matters to us is the settlement of the situation and the protection of our own interests.
Russia's foreign ministry has suddenly announced that Moscow is ready to consider a real U.S. proposals for ending its war against Ukraine. Maria Zakharova claims Russia will not reject specific initiatives. In the same breath, however, she says, Moscow's strategic goals have already been defined and its objectives have already been set. In other words, the Kremlin is ready to negotiate, provided the outcome has been agreed by the Kremlin in advance. Meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov complains that Russia no longer trusts the West, a remarkable statement from a state that has repeatedly broken agreements, lied about its invasion to Ukraine, and used negotiations as cover to regroup its forces. Also, Zakharova has found a new explanation for Europe's military buildup. According to Russia's foreign ministry, European countries are expanding defense production not because of Russia's war, threats, and missiles, but because they are trying to rescue their own economies.
This incredible, monstrous, rabid, and in fact foolish militarization that they are pursuing is intended first and foremost, in my view, to somehow hold together a collapsing economy and an industry that is in a state of extreme decline, simply because there are no resources and no energy supplies.
The Kremlin has now explained what kind of a person it would like to see in Kyiv, someone prepared to take responsibility for ending the war on Russia's terms. Dmitry Peskov says Moscow needs a Ukrainian decision-maker who can deliver what the Kremlin calls a peaceful settlement, or failing that, allow Russia to declare its so-called special military operation complete. In other words, Russia is not particularly interested in who runs Ukraine, provided that person is willing to sign that Moscow puts on the table.
The main thing for us is that there should be someone within the Kiev regime who is prepared to take responsibility. There must be someone who is willing to make a responsible decision. That decision should make it possible to move toward a peaceful settlement. Alternatively, it should make it possible to bring the special military operation to an end.
Russia has killed at least 2 people and injured 10 others, including children, in an overnight missile attack on Odessa. According to regional authorities, one of those killed was a woman who had been walking in a park with her children. The children survived. Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 8 missiles and 130 long-range strike drones across the country overnight. The attack comes as Russia continues targeting Ukrainian cities and civilian infrastructure with the missiles and drones. Sergei Lavrov is celebrating 25 years of Russian-Chinese friendship with an article describing their relationship as a model of equality, mutual benefit, and shared national interest. But just days earlier, the Wall Street Journal described a rather different relationship. Russia increasingly reduced to China's junior partner, heavily dependent on Beijing for trade, technology, diplomatic protection, and a market for the energy Europe no longer wants.
This clearly confirms a simple truth. The traditions of friendship and good neighborliness that unite us have enduring value. They are free from any short-term calculations and are driven by the broad commonality of the national interests of our 2 countries and peoples. Trade turnover has increased more than 30-fold over the past quarter of a century and has significantly exceeded $200 billion for 3 consecutive years. Payments have now been transferred almost entirely into national currencies.
According to the Wall Street Journal, Chinese officials told Gazprom that Beijing would support the long-delayed Power of Siberia 2 pipeline only if Russia supplied gas at the heavily discounted price charged to Russian domestic consumers. In effect, China was asking Moscow to subsidize the project it desperately needs. In Moscow's version, this is a friendship without calculations built on equality. In Beijing's version, Russia brings the oil, gas, and political isolation, and China sets the terms. And now the cherry on top. The Kremlin says Russia remains open to negotiations over Ukraine, although it sees no conditions for talks to resume anytime soon. Dmitry Peskov insists Moscow is still committed to a diplomatic settlement. The same Moscow that continues the war against Ukraine rejects responsibility for it and treats every pause as an opportunity to improve its position.
Russia remains open to negotiations on resolving the situation around Ukraine. At the same time, we currently see no prerequisites for the negotiation process to resume in the near future. Nevertheless, Russia remains open to a diplomatic path towards settling the Ukrainian conflict.
Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan says Ankara will continue trying to organize another round of Russian-Ukrainian talks. Keir Starmer is leaving office as British Prime Minister, but he chose Kyiv for his farewell visit. In his final interview in the job, he assured President Zelenskyy that the departure of a British Prime Minister does not mean the departure of a British support for Ukraine.
The message to President Zelenskyy is one I delivered at the press conference, but I'd also delivered privately to him, and that is that the UK commitment to Ukraine will not waver. We will be there for as long as it takes and a long time afterwards, and it was really important as I stepped down that I told that to President Zelenskyy.
Starmer also said that the past 6 months had marked a turning point in the war. He highlighted Ukraine's progress on the battlefield, the effective use of long-range weapons, the impact of the sanctions on the Russian economy, and the pressure being applied to the Kremlin's shadow fleet. But the British Prime Minister said the most important result of the war was Ukraine's transformation into one of the strongest military forces in Europe.
I believe Ukraine will win this war. I think that the last 6 months have been a real turning point because at the beginning of the conflict, everybody assumed that Russia would win within a matter of weeks. We are now in year 5, and what has happened in that time is Ukraine has begun to push back on the front this year. Medium range and long range missiles have been used to great effect. The economic sanctions have had real damage to the Russian economy, the work that's been done on the shadow fleet. But the other reason I think we sometimes miss this is that one of the consequences of 4.5 years of conflict here in Ukraine is they now have one of the most effective, efficient military forces anywhere in Europe. They're tech savvy, they've got incredible skills on the front line. Their drone warfare has gone from, I remember the early days seeing their capability to now world-leading capability. What they've shown is that it's not just the size of your army, it's how you fight a modern conflict. And so they are probably the most effective fighting machine in Europe.
Yeah,
that is what 4.5 years. So they will win this conflict.
Thousands of Ukrainians remained on the streets of Kyiv late into the night after President Volodymyr Zelenskyy dismissed Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov just 6 months into the job. Protesters say the decision was never properly explained and reflects a broader refusal by the government to communicate with the society. Many also argue that Fedorov had already become one of the most trusted and effective figures in Ukraine's wartime leadership.
These people, among other things, made Zelenskyy the president. I hope that Zelenskyy will hear them again, draw conclusions, and change his decision, taking into account the opinion of these people and those people who cannot be here now for one reason or another. If you follow the comments on the internet and in public discussions, Fedorov's resignation is opposed not only by the people who are here, but also by many military personnel and other Ukrainians.
The protests continued for more than one day. Demonstrators observed a minute of silence of those killed in the war, sang the national anthem, and later lit the square with their mobile phones. For many of them, the anger was not only about Fedorov's dismissal, it was also about the way the entire government reshuffle was carried out without a clear public explanation during a full-scale war.
Fedorov is the best candidate. He was, and he is. He has only been in this position for 6 months, which is a very short period of time, but he has already done quite a lot. And so, as you can see, his achievements are reflected in the people who have gathered here. Everyone sees this. I do not think that Kamara, the newly appointed acting defense minister, or Klemenko, one of the possible candidates for the position, or anyone else, will be able to influence people in the same way, or inspire so many people to come out and defend them.
Other protesters said the main problem was not simply the replacement of one minister with another, but the message that the government has sent to the public that no explanation was necessary.
This decision to install a new government, a new cabinet of ministers, wasn't explained at all. The problem is there was no communication at all. Nobody explained, they just did. You don't deserve an explanation. We owe you nothing. We just did it because we thought this would be nice. Why? Based on what? Nobody told us, just some couple phrases were thrown at us like bones to the dogs. Just deal with it. So because all these people stand here for more than 12 hours.
The Reds are not merely leaving the Russian ship, they are taking billions with them. Some of Russia's wealthiest businessmen, including oligarchs close to Putin, are moving assets abroad at an accelerating pace. While the Kremlin keeps insisting that the economy has survived everything, the people who knows its real condition best are shifting their money into gold, cryptocurrency, overseas property, and investment funds in the Gulf.
Several of Russia's richest businessmen have moved billions of dollars out of the country over the past year as concerns grow about the future of the economy and the federal budget. High-profile asset seizures have intensified fears among members of the Russian elite that the state could confiscate their wealth or that they could lose it for other reasons. Several billionaires have recently transferred additional assets out of Russia amid concerns about the condition of the banking sector. The investment portfolios of some of the country's wealthiest people have shifted noticeably toward cryptocurrency, gold, overseas real estate, and private investment funds. Russia's economic slowdown has reduced their profits and limited their ability to preserve and expand their wealth inside the country.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching.